Morning, students. We are continuing with our lessons on the Mughal period. Today, we are going to discuss about Aurangzeb, one of the most important and the last emperors of the Mughal dynasty. Aurangzeb almost ruled for a period of more than 50 years, and these 50 years have been very detrimental to the political fortunes of the Mughal Empire. Akbar and Aurangzeb were completely opposite in their understanding of what a state was. Akbar's idea of state was that of a benevolent, non-oppressive, and a liberal state. But whereas when you come down to Aurangzeb, Aurangzeb strongly felt that his father and grandfathers had made a mistake in building up the kind of a state that should have been built in medieval India under the Mughal dynasty. Aurangzeb strongly believed that the entire region or the kingdom can be Islamized, and this should be, or if possible, can be converted into an Islamic state. This was the fundamental difference between the state under Akbar and under Aurangzeb. The Mughal state is sandwiched between the ideas of Akbar and Aurangzeb. While one contributed to the growth, prosperity, and cultural development and other aspects of the Mughal state, after Aurangzeb, the state disintegrates. It is both a political downfall and socio-economic disintegration. So we will just try to see how this process of the period of Aurangzeb has contributed to the process of disintegration of the Mughal Empire. We will examine both the points, the glory of the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb, at the same time, how it becomes a factor of one of the causes for the downfall of the Mughal Empire. So we will just try to analyze that particular period. After the War of Succession, Aurangzeb ascends the throne of Delhi on 21st July 1658. And in fact, his enthronement takes twice. It is once it is in 1658, 21st July, and the next time it is in 1659, June 21st. He was the last Mughal emperor, and he was around 40 years old when he gets onto the throne, and he ruled for a period of 50 years. The period of Aurangzeb can be divided into two parts. The first part being the operations in North India, and the second part being the operations in South India. Before we go into this political history, I would like to show you some of the slides connected to the Aurangzeb period. In this slide, you can see a portrait of Aurangzeb. He was born on 3rd November 1618 and died on 3rd March 1707. Ruled for a period of 50 years almost, from July 31st, 1658 to March 3rd March 1707. So the next slide is as an emperor. That was the period. This is as a prince, and this is as an emperor when he becomes the emperor of the Mughal Empire. And this slide, you can see that Aurangzeb is seated on a golden throne, holding a hawk and darbar. Standing before him is his son, who is Azam Shah. So this is a typical Mughal darbar type of portrait that you can see in the photo. The second one is Aurangzeb sitting on the peacock throne. This was a kind of a court photo where he used to have the deliberations of the Mughal court. And here you find the queens of the harem of Aurangzeb traveling to Kashmir. So these are some of the photos which are connected to the personal life of Akbar. And here you can see the brothers. As I was telling you, there were 4 brothers. You can see 3 of them going out for a horse ride in the jungle. And here you can see the Mughal army in command under Aurangzeb in October 1635. So these are some of the photographs that are connected to Aurangzeb. Now we will go into the political history of the period of Aurangzeb, that is the period from 1605 to 1707. Here you can see the Mughal Empire, and the Mughal Empire from 1605 to 1607, and the areas in the light blue shade indicate the kind of inclusion of the regions which were included in the Mughal Empire during the period of Aurangzeb. So you have the north and you have the south. So the operations, the political operations of Aurangzeb can be divided into two parts: the operations in the north and the operations in the south. So these are the two phases in which you'll have to understand. So in the first case, we will understand the operations in northern India, that is from 1658 to 1681, almost for a period of 30 years. You have Aurangzeb operating in northern India, and after that you have him concentrating on southern India. The first important one was the invasion of Assam, and this was a very important event. After the Shuja and Mir Jumla, one of the most capable generals of the Mughal, was appointed as the governor of Bengal. They were appointed as the governors of Bengal. He invaded Assam because the Raja of Kuch Bihar and the Ahom king, Ahom was the dynasty of the Assam. Ahoms are the dynasties, the conventional dynasties of the Assam. The Ahom king of Assam had captured some of the Mughal territory in Assam. So this was taken as a pretext, and Mir Jumla died shortly after that. So after a fatigue explosion, Guwahati was lost in 1681, but Kuch Bihar was permanently annexed. So when he was trying to move towards Assam, up to Kuch Bihar, he was able to annex. And this was done in between the years 1661 and 1663. And then the next important area which was occupied by him is the Arkan. After the death of Mir Jumla, Aurangzeb's maternal uncle, Shaist Khan, was appointed as the governor of Bengal. So Shaist Khan becomes the governor of Bengal, and he invaded Akran. This was one place, and captured the island of Sondip from Portuguese. So he also strengthened the fleet, defeating the Raja of Arkan, and annexed the Chittagong district. So this was the second operation of Aurangzeb in the northern India. Then when he was operating in the northern India, you have the emergence of the Maratha forces in south. And this was the period where Shivaji was coming to the forefront, and he was coming with major political ambitions. So you have Aurangzeb, the Mughal army under the control of Aurangzeb, confronting with Shivaji from the years 1663 to 1680. That is almost for a period of 18 years. The Marathas fought against the mighty and powerful Mughal Empire. After Aurangzeb's reign, during the period of Aurangzeb's reign, the Marathas became very strong in the Deccan under the leadership of Shivaji. Shivaji captured some of the Mughal territories. Shivaji was very familiar with the Marathwada region, and he was very much comfortable in waging a war in this particular region, in the Deccan, especially in the Marathwada region. So Shivaji had captured certain parts of Mughal territory, and he was striking the Mughal forts time and again. So this irritated Aurangzeb, and Aurangzeb had decided to subjugate the Marathas in the Deccan. Otherwise, they would become a major threatening force in the Deccan. So taking this factor into consideration, he had sent Shaist Khan to the Deccan as the governor to curb the threatening activities of Shivaji. He was plundering, Shivaji was plundering some of the regions or areas belonging to the Mughal Empire. So to teach him a lesson, Shaist Khan was sent. But Shivaji made a surprising attack on Shaist Khan at Pune. Shaist Khan narrowly escapes this, his death with the loss of the 3 of his fingers and also the son. So Shaist Khan was attacked, and when he was attacked, In the physical fight, he loses 3 fingers and his son. And after this, Said Khan escapes and flees. After that, Prince Muzam and then Raja Jai Singh of Amber were sent against Shivaji. So Jai Singh of Amber and Prince Muzam, they were sent against to subdue, to bring down and defeat the Marathas in course of a war. Jai Singh persuaded Shivaji under certain conditions to visit Aurangzeb's court. This was a kind of a treasury that was played, a game that was played by Raja Jai Singh of Amba, and he wanted Shivaji to have an understanding with the Mughal Empire. So on this pretext, he convinces Shivaji that Shivaji should travel to Delhi to meet the the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. But Shivaji did not observe the court ethic. So Shivaji finally agrees to the proposals of Raja Jai Singh, and he moves towards the Mughal court, and he does not come up with the regular mannerisms that were followed in the in the Mughal court. So this had become a cause of irritation for Aurangzeb, and as Aurangzeb put him under house arrest. So he was invited to the Mughal court under the deliberations of Raja Jai Singh, and when he visits the court, he is put behind literally house arrest. So this was what Shivaji did not like, and so very clearly Shivaji escapes and succeeds in reaching the succeeds reaching the Deccan provinces. Shivaji after that continued his wars with the Mughals and won back several of the forts of the Mughals, and Shivaji died in the year 1680. Here we have just discussed about Shivaji in a brief context. The basic idea was to make a point that the Marathas as a force had emerged during the period of Aurangzeb, and they had challenged the Mughal supremacy or the Mughal suzerainty in the Indian context. When we deal with Shivaji independently, we will be again dealing with this particular period, trying to tell you, I'll try to explain the intensity of resistance that Shivaji had come up against the mighty Mughal Empire. Then you have the Jat rebellions in the year 1699. Early in the year 1699, the Jats were basically a peasant community. They were basically an agrarian community of the Mathura district. You can see Mathura. They were belonging to the Mathura district. They were unable to put up with the persecutory policy of the Faujdars. So the Jats had a difference of opinion with the Faujdar, and the policies that the Faujdar was adopting in the Mughal Empire in this particular region. So the rebellion was put down and Gokul was put to death. The Jat leadership was under the Gokul, and when they revolted, Gokul was put to death. But the Jats continued to give trouble to Aurangzeb throughout his reign and even after his death. The Jats proved a menace to the Mughal Empire. They revolted again and again in 1681 and 1688. So suddenly you see that the Marathas have arose against the Mughal Empire. The Jats have arose against the Mughal Empire, and all these forces were forces of integration during the time of Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan. So suddenly there is a kind of a change in the attitude of the people. So this is what we will have to examine, and this we will see. Let us see how many more races have revolted against the Mughal Empire. The next important revolt was the Satnami revolt in the year 1672. Satnamis were a sect of Hindus, and they lived in the Narnul near Delhi and numbered about 4,000 to 5,000. They were religious people, but had carried on agriculture and also trade. In the year 1672, they revolted against the government tax collector and insulted one of them. And after slight early success, they defeated and uh, they were defeated and crushed. So the Satnami revolts, you have the Jats revolting, you have the Satnamis also revolting. Both the revolts were put down. But the point that has to be thought over here is, why were the Jats revolting and why did the Satnamis revolt? This is the point which we'll be discussing in due course of the lecture. So the next important revolt came from the Sikh community. So you have the Jats revolting, you have the Satnamis revolting, you have now the Sikhs revolting. In the year 1675, Guru Tegh Bahadur, the 9th Guru of the Sikhs, lived in Anandpur Sahib. He protested against the anti-Hindu policy of Aurangzeb. And because of this, he was executed in the year 1657 because he refused to accept Islam. So Akbar did, as I was telling you, Akbar thought that the entire region can be Islamized. This was a fundamental mistake and a conceptual misunderstanding of the kingdom by the powerful Mughal emperor. So he wanted him to accept Islam. And when he refused to accept Islam, he was put to death. His son Guru Gobind Singh organized the Sikh Khalsa, the Sikhs into a military organization. Khalsa is a military organization and it was organized by Guru Gobind Singh and fought against the Mughals all through his life. And he put up a brave fight and sacrificed all his 4 sons, but never severed from his resolve. So he gave the ultimate sacrifice. He lost his 4 sons, but never surrendered to the Mughal Empire because of the kind of a religious policy that Aurangzeb was following during his reign. So you have the Jats revolting, you have the Satnamis revolting, you have the Sikhs also revolting. Now let us see 1 or 2 important reforms that are connected to Aurangzeb. One of the most important reform that is connected to Aurangzeb is the imposition of jizya tax in the year 1679. Jizya was abolished by Akbar, and you have Aurangzeb again imposing the jizya tax. And Aurangzeb was a staunch Sunni Muslim, and he imposed jizya in 1679, which Akbar had abolished in 1564. This was very much and very badly resented by the Hindu community. See, one point that one has to understand here is what Akbar did through his religious policy, through his policy towards Rajputs, and through his policy towards Hindus. He was trying to integrate the majority of the population, that is the Hindus, into the service of the Mughals. Whether it was revenue, whether it was defense, or whether it was any other area of services, where they felt that the services of the Hindu population was important, Akbar had tried his level best to integrate their services, and suddenly you have a reversal of this policy during the period of Aurangzeb. So this leads to the emergence of divisive forces. See, in any state, at any given period of time, there will be some kind of divisive forces, and these divisive forces have to be handled very carefully. On this ground, Akbar failed, we can say, because it was, Aurangzeb failed because it was during the period of Aurangzeb, you have the Jats, you have the Satnamis, you have the Sikhs, you have the Marathas, and going against the Mughal Empire, and you have the imposition of jizya tax and other taxes. So in these circumstances, you have one of the most important races, that is the Rajputs. The Rajputs start revolting against the Mughal Empire, and this goes on from the period of 1679 to 1681. With the kind of policies and with the kind of revolts that were coming up pan-India, that is across India, the Rajputs were completely dissatisfied, and they were more dissatisfied more than on the political ground. They were more dissatisfied with the policy of Aurangzeb, and as a result of which, they considered them as their enemies. So when the Rajputs were coming up with a protest against the policies of Aurangzeb, the Rajputs were considered as their enemies or the enemies of the Mughal state. So, important race. See, all these races, whether you're talking of the Jats, you're talking of the Satamis, you're talking of the Rajputs, they played a very important role in a very important contributory role in the development of the Mughal state. And now suddenly all these forces, all these races, which are in fact the backbone of the political structure and systems in the Indian context, suddenly unhappy and going against the Mughal state. This was a major change that happened. So as a result of which, you will find that Aurangzeb is depending more and more on the strength of his army and people loyal to him to suppress these revolts and control the state, control the revolts with the help of the military. So suddenly you find that under Aurangzeb, the nature of the state is undergoing a change, which is going to have a telling impact on the economic and social conditions of Mughal Empire during the period of Aurangzeb. So this is what we have to keep in mind. So as the Rajputs discontentment was growing, we will have to see how it turns into some kind of a revolt and resistance. The Rajputs resisting against the Mughal Empire. The Rajputs were dissatisfied with the religious policy of Aurangzeb, and he too considered them as enemies. So this is the fact under Aurangzeb. He wanted to conquer Mewar and the premier Rajput state and in northern India, and should get a chance to do it. So again, you have some kind of a confederation of the Rajput forces in the Marwar region. So he wanted to wage a war against the Marwar and make it an integral part, technically in the part of the Mughal Empire. So Raja Jaswant Singh of Mewar, whom Aurangzeb had employed as a general on the frontiers of Punjab, died in the year 1678. Aurangzeb detained his infant son Ajit Singh and also Jaswant Singh's widow in Delhi. He wanted to bring up the two infant sons of Jaswant Singh as Muslims. See, this is very objectionable. What Aurangzeb's plan was to, when Raja Jaswant Singh died, he wanted to convert both his sons to Islam. This was highly objectionable. But the Rajput chief who went against this idea of Aurangzeb was Raja Durgadas Rathod. So Raja Durgadas succeeded in rescuing these two boys, and the action of the emperor was made, this action of the emperor made the Aurangzeb very angry. Besides, in 1679, the jizya tax was also reimposed. Okay, so all these factors made the foundation on which the Mughal Empire was built itself was being questioned, and Aurangzeb was probably trying to change the foundation of the Mughal Empire, as a result of which it had a telling impact on the Mughals. So Mewar and Marwar and other Rajput forces joined against Aurangzeb. This was an imperialist force led by three sons of Aurangzeb, met several reverses. So the Mughal army started facing some kind of defeats and some kind of a reverse at the hands of the Rajputs. Okay, so the Rajput war, however, proved very harmful to the Mughal army. So the war continues between the Rajputs and the Mughals, and this proved to be very detrimental for Aurangzeb and for the political fortunes of the Mughal Empire. So if you can see, the Rose portion of the Mughal Empire, which was a very stable economy, very stable in the political conditions, because of the kind of policies that were initiated by Akbar, which were followed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan, suddenly rises up. This is happening basically because of the kind of a reversal of the policies, especially on the religious ground. On the religious ground, the reversal of policies by Aurangzeb. I'll just show you one slide in which you can see how the Mughal Empire has grown from 1526 to 1707. See, the dotted line is the line which is showing you at the time of Babur, that is in 1525. And the orange, not the orange, the yellow, strong yellow was the regions which were added by Akbar. And the orange one was added by Aurangzeb. So if you just see Aurangzeb's empire, it was almost from Hindu Kush and from Kabul, it was touching the borders of Cochin. So this is a very vast empire. So politically, when he was trying to expand the empire, he was completely successful. And here you can see the Mughal Empire in 1701. You can see the green shaded portion is what do you say, the Mughal Empire. The slightly lighter shade of green is the vassal state, and the orange were the regions which were occupied during the period of the Mughals. So these are some of the photos which are showing Aurangzeb facing a maddened war elephant, and you have some of the people loyal to Aurangzeb waiting behind, waiting outside Aurangzeb's palace. So these are some of the photos which are depicting the times and the kind of conditions that were prevailing in the Mughal period between the years 1605 and 1707. Sorry, 1525 and 1707. So if you just see, now we just saw that how the policies of Aurangzeb had, this is the, as I am showing you, this is a picture of the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb. So you find that the yellow region suddenly raising in revolt against the Mughal Empire. This was the region for which a strong foundation was laid during the time of Akbar. A socio-economic and political integration has taken up. So we will again see the Deccan policy of Aurangzeb and see how some kind of a political unrest emerges during the period of Aurangzeb. Now, trying to understand the Deccan policy, you can see that in the map there is the Deccan Plateau. So, what was Aurangzeb's policy? See, the Deccan policy of Akbar, Shah Jahan, and Jahangir and Shah Jahan was almost the same. But the state policy and the Deccan policy of Aurangzeb underwent a change. So now we will just try to understand what was the Deccan policy of Aurangzeb. After the conclusion of wars with the Rajputs, Aurangzeb bent his whole energy. He spent his whole energy on the task of subduing the Deccan or bringing the Deccan, the orange portion which you see in the map. With the aim, he sent out for Deccan in the year 1682. He already had acted as a governor of the Deccan, so he was quite familiar with the Deccan regions. During the period of Shah Jahan, he was appointed as a governor. So he again comes back to Deccan in the year 1682 and spent some time over there. Almost for a period of 6 years, he was there in the Deccan. And when he goes to the Deccan, probably that was his fate. He was not destined to come back to Delhi. So now trying to understand his operations in the Deccan. One of the objectives with which Aurangzeb moved to Deccan was he wanted to extinguish the kingdom of Golconda and Bijapur. And the second objective was to curb the growing power of the Marathas. And on the third front, he wanted to remove the danger caused by the presence of his rebel son Akbar in the Deccan. So you have three important reasons which dominated Aurangzeb's Deccan policy. The first important reason was he wanted to extinguish Golconda and Bijapur. The second important reason was he wanted to check the growth of Maratha power. The third important factor was Akbar, who was son of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb's son's name was also Akbar. So he wanted to check Akbar in the Deccan provinces. The reason is because of the fact that there was a possibility that Akbar might revolt against Aurangzeb and proclaim himself as an independent kingdom, as an independent king in the Deccan regions. So we will just see these 3 points now. So in the first phase, he tried to conquer the Bijapur and Golconda. Several reasons prompted Aurangzeb to go to war with these kingdoms. They were, the states were helping Marathas, that is Bijapur and Golconda were helping Marathas, and their rulers were Shias. Shias and Sunnis did not have a kind of an understanding. Shias were continuously opposed by Shias. So he wanted to go to the Deccan because he wanted to oppose Shias, because it was a Shia kingdom. Both Bijapur and Golconda were Shia kingdoms, and he was a staunch Sunni. So you have that Shia and Sunni angle also. And Aurangzeb wanted to convert the Shia empire into a Sunni empire. So you have three reasons for him to attack Bijapur and Golconda. One was the growing power of the Marathas. The second one was the Shias. And the third one was Aurangzeb wanted to extend his empire. So these are the three reasons why he is trying to campaign. So those three reasons which we had discussed earlier, now we have specific reasons for him to attack Bijapur and Golconda. At first, Aurangzeb sent his son Azam to conquer Bijapur, but did not meet with any success. Okay, so Aurangzeb therefore went there in person, and after a siege of more than a year, the king of Bijapur starved and he surrendered in the year 1686. In its ruler, Sikandar Shah was pensioned off and Bijapur was annexed by the Mughal Empire. So that's the story about the Mughals and the Bijapur. Now, taking Golconda into consideration, in the year 1687, Golconda was besieged. Abul Hassan and the king fought like a brave hero. Abul Hassan was the ruler of Golconda. He fought like a brave hero. And in some cases, he won against Aurangzeb's army. The fort was gallantly defended by a very brave general whose name was Abdul Razak. And all hopes of success were lost when Aurangzeb bribed the god in the fort and opened up the fort's gate and entered the fort. So this was the way in which Aurangzeb enters the Golconda fort, and Golconda becomes a part of the Mughal Empire. And after that, Daulatabad was also conquered, and the conquest of the Deccan Muslim states, which he considered as Shia states, which he considered as liberal states. He considered all Shia states as liberal states. And so he was, even if Shias were Muslims, he was so religiously intolerant, a strong Sunni, that even Shias he was not able to tolerate. So now you can understand how much kind of dislike that he might have had, or how much religiously intolerant he was with regard to the Hindu population in the country in that particular period. Okay, so you have the two important kingdoms, Bijapur and Golconda falling down, and then you finally have the Marathas. The Marathas were under Rajaram, and the Rajaram died in the year 1700, and his widow Tarabai carried on the fight against the Mughals, and the failure of long campaign against the Marathas was mainly for two reasons. Why he wanted to bring the Marathas under his control. There were again two reasons for this. The Mughal army had not only become weak and ease-loving, but was also quite disorganized. Okay, the Marathas adopted guerrilla war tactics and never fought in the open area. They suffered very little of defeats and gained very much by their victories and plundering the Mughal regions of the Mughal Empire. So this was one important factor. So you have specific reasons for him to take up a Deccan policy, and we will just now try to see. So you have two important reasons. One was the Shia states. The second one was the Marathas. Third one was Akbar, who was his son, who was camping in the Deccan region. So now we will just see what was the result of his Deccan policy. The Deccan campaigns proved very harmful to the Mughal Empire, and continuous warfare. See, for quite a long time he fought wars in the north, and now he is fighting wars in the south. This had weakened physically the Mughal army, and it also has weakened the Mughal army financially. So in northern India, the Sikhs and the Jats rose in revolt. Along with the Satnamis, the governors of these provinces did not care for the much central administration which was under the control of the Mughals. The administration grew sick and corrupt. The Mughal administration became corrupt. The empire became too heavy or too large to be controlled by one man. So every man has certain limits. So the limits, Aurangzeb went beyond his limits without trusting anyone. He did not have any loyalists. So it becomes difficult for him to control the Mughal empire. And suddenly you find that the great empire is falling apart. And we can consider that the Deccan policy of Aurangzeb was an ulcer which ultimately killed Aurangzeb. So we will just try to see the death of Aurangzeb and continue about Aurangzeb in the next session. For 1 minute, for about 1698, if not earlier, Aurangzeb's prolonged campaign in the Deccan had resulted in kind of a ill health. And this Deccan campaign, which proved very detrimental to the fortunes of political and economic fortunes of the Mughal Empire, also had a detrimental factor on the health of Aurangzeb, and Aurangzeb dies in the year 1707. So we will continue from here, and the rest of Aurangzeb and the causes for the downfall of the Mughal Empire will be estimated in the next class.